We're going to continue our discussions here on the transition stage, spotlighting how to green the hard-to-abate sectors that really need that change to happen. Let's talk a little bit about supporting breakthrough innovations to those hard-to-abate sectors. I welcome our panelists on stage who are in the room, and also those of them joining us online, like a number of our viewers who are also joining us from around the world. So thank you to those who are watching virtually and joining us virtually, and to our panelists who are joining us virtually. Sam Priest and Steph Murphy, thank you for being available to us. We want to ensure that, Sam, you're feeling well and okay. You were supposed to join us in person, but I understand you've been in contact with someone with COVID, so thank you for taking the precautions to self-isolate. These are the times that we tend to lose guests, but not completely lose them thanks to technology. Dr. Alexander Feichandral, Technology Officer Upstream and Head of Environment Solution Business at Prime Metals Technologies at the MHI Group, joins us. We also have Mike Train, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer at Emerson, here in person. To introduce Sam Pearce properly, he is EMEA Regional Industrial Decarbonization Lead at ERM, and also Steph Murphy, she is Director for Industrial Energy, Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy of BEIS of the United Kingdom. Thank you all. Let's kick this conversation off. We've had a number of chats about what's important for decarbonizing in the hard-to-abate sectors this morning. A lot of it came down to carbon pricing, and I think the conversations tend to go down a whirlpool on that one. So let's start off with a bigger picture from all of you of what truly are the challenges. It can't just be carbon pricing. If I can ask you, Mike, and then we'll head over to Alexander as well.
Good, and great to be here, and thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So if we think about our hard-to-abate sectors, you know, we have industries like steel making, cement, we talked about that a little bit this morning, petrochemicals, anything with these really high heat processes are the ones that I think are going to be the toughest to abate. Carbon pricing may give us a way to quantify some investment opportunities in these spaces, but you know, we've got to prove out some technological things first, I think. So, you know, when I get the opportunity to have conversations with people, you know, we need to be advocating for getting some at-scale implementation of these novel solutions in place so that we can learn about them technologically as well as economically and what those policy pieces we have going forward. So, you know, we also need to, I think, appreciate stewards like Alexander who have these challenges and embrace them and support them as they, you know, they have the tougher challenges, and to make sure that we kind of surround them with that support, those opportunities, and drive things forward. So I think it's a really exciting sector. I want to express that especially for our younger talents in the world. You know, there are some great problems here, and I think we need to attract people to come to this and work these spaces as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Alexander, we heard from Ken this morning on an overall picture for MHI. From your perspective specifically, what are the big challenges here in greening these sectors?
Well, I'm representing the steel sector specifically, and the big issue about that is, well, that steel industry is still focused very much or based very much on carbon. 75% of the energy is fossil from carbon, and that has to be changed. So one thing is definitely to go into renewable power, electrification. The other thing is hydrogen. And I think what Mike just said is an important issue. So we have to do high-speed innovation. We have to recruit talents. So just want to mention at the beginning here that we've won a lighthouse project also kicked off that focus on hydrogen-based direct reduction. So what is new about that? So far, the direct reduction is utilizing natural gas, and before it has to be agglomerated as a feedstock. What we're doing now is we're trying to use iron ore directly as it comes from the mines. So concentrates fine iron ore and reduce that fully based on hydrogen. Why is it important? Because a lot of iron ore in the world is very fine nature. And we have to utilize that in the future if more and more blast furnaces are blown down and cannot utilize that iron ore anymore.
Sam, if I can ask you, from your perspective, as you go through this decarbonization process, what is the most worrying problem you have to deal with right now?
I think it's probably, as some of the other panelists have just touched on, the speed. We need to move quickly with this. And we're probably, obviously there are the technical points that the others have made, but I think there's also a number of non-technical factors that we at ERM are supporting our clients with to ensure we're getting that speed.
If I can also then ask you, Steph, from a base perspective, you've drawn out the plans, you've given out some guidelines, you're supporting a number of these initiatives. The big challenges from a policy perspective would be then what?
Sure, thank you. So, I mean, industry accounts for around 16% of UK emissions, and while emissions have been declining, they'll need to reduce by 95% relative to today's level if we're going to reach net zero. So government has an ambitious range of policies in place to incentivize and support industry to invest in innovative clean technologies and to reduce carbon emissions. So government is making significant investment in emerging and innovative technologies that can support hard-to-abate sectors. One of the biggest challenges is bringing down the risk and cost of new technologies, and this includes support for carbon capture technology and hydrogen, clean hydrogen. We cannot address net zero without also addressing energy efficiency. While we work to get new and innovative technology rolled out, we're also focusing effort and resources on action now. And that includes funding for energy efficiency deployment projects and engineering studies for energy efficiency and decarbonisation projects through our Industrial Energy Transformation Fund. So the public and private sectors have got to work together in partnership to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Government's seeking to provide long-term clarity and confidence to industry through regular dialogue and clear timelines on next steps.
And isn't that the challenge, Mike? Getting everybody on the table at the same time and actually being on the same page. I mean, everybody seems to want to get to net zero. That goal is very much there. But yeah. You've got a unique perspective on this from Emerson and the role that you have at Emerson as well. What has been your learning of bringing people to a table and having that conversation and actually driving them to where they need to be?
You know, if you think about the different stakeholders we're trying to connect in that process, you know, we have industry, companies, you know, private sector.
If I can get you to hold the mic a little bit closer so you can be clearer.
We have our government friends that obviously, they need to know how far we think the technology can go so they can shape the policy to encourage, you know, those deployments of those technologies. So there's a communication there. We have academic friends who are coming up with some of these novel solutions and giving those lighthouse projects, you know, some way of bringing those forward and getting these all connected. So I think, you know, what I've learned this week, I think there's plenty of interest, there's plenty of hope, there's plenty of optimism, and now it is a speed thing, as was just referenced a moment ago. We need to get together, we need to bring them forward, we got to get some at-scale implementations accomplished. You know, we get to see it from the digital automation perspective, a unique perspective. You know, so we're trying to think about, okay, let's say you want to use hydrogen, that's that small molecule that's a little more difficult to manage than a natural gas molecule. So our technology's got to be right, our ability to measure it's got to be right, our ability to give that control system, that control process to our customers so they can manage it. So we're all going through those steps right now of getting that experience, gaining that experience, and then we need to share this broadly and quickly, from my point of view.
And a good example of that might be a little bit of an elaboration on the Lighthouse project. Let's talk a little bit about your project and your pilot project in Austria. Tell us a little bit about how that works. What kind of example is it setting for your business and for others in the business so the message gets out? Because it is a difficult sector to bring on board, especially in countries like India.
Yeah, true. So I think I would like to reconnect what Edwin Basson was saying yesterday in the final panel here on the stage. What it requires is quite a broad variety of technologies. So we cannot focus on a single technology, like only utilizing green hydrogen. Maybe on the long run, this will be the solution, but we have to act quickly. So one or two things we can do right now is, first of all, get out of coal as quick as possible. And the best opportunity is switch from coal to natural gas. This has already a potential to decarbonize by about 2/3 where we're coming from. So steel has close to 2 tons of CO2 per ton of steel. That's a major step and is on the way right now. So the other thing is electrification, meaning utilizing all the scrap in the market and to remelt scrap in electric arc furnaces. And I think even our businesses are pretty close. So what is required is really platform technologies. It's not sufficient saying this is green steel. We have to define finally green steel. What is the footprint of an individual coil as a product that goes into the market? And this has to be certified. So we need blockchain technologies, all that issues that it qualifies for really green steel that goes into the market.
How does the plant in Austria help you do that? Because I'm trying to correlate, if that is one of your pilots and that's where you're trying it out, how are you doing it there? How does the process work? And does it set somewhat of an example for the industry in terms of what you're saying is needed to qualify these products, qualify the supply chain? If you can run us through it, it would be very helpful.
Yeah, love to do that. So that pilot is set up with for the direct reduction of the finals with hydrogen, but it could easily run also with natural gas. So even in countries where not sufficient amount of green hydrogen is available, we can run it on natural gas. Still, with a certain decarbonization effect. What comes with that pilot as well is not only de-risking the technology to scale it up and to commercialize finally the technology and to roll it out, but it's also a showcase for digitalization. So we have this pilot fully digitalized, starting really from all the smart sensoring that we have there. We can run the plant virtually from home. We have not to be on site. So we do all the big data tracking. We do data analysis in that plant. And I think all the learning from that pilot is useful not only for the pilot technology, but in general for the steel sector and the hard-to-abate industry. Because, as said, time is of essence, and digitalization accelerates simply the innovation process, but also the learning effect, and it opens also more attractiveness for talents. So that's what we are lacking, actually. I mean, steel sector is not known as being a quite sexy industry. So what happened in the past 2 decades is really we saw a lack of students in process engineering, in metallurgy, and so on. So if we link now that all together, digitalization, hydrogen technology, electrification, platform technologies in the automation,
you make it cool.
It will be much more attractive and cool and sexy for the students, and that's an important issue. Yeah.
Sam, digitalization is quite a critical aspect that we've been hearing about for the last 2 days as well as today. How do you see it play out? We had Sanjay from IBM talk about platforms, data sharing, democratization of data. In terms of the vision that you see for how these industries can share that data, are they collecting enough? Is there a gap in that collection? What more needs to be done to completely harmonize it?
So I think for us, we help companies take that strategic through to tactical. So we're helping set the objectives and the plans, really delivering something that's scientifically robust, something that's really got that commercial value to it, and the technical practicality and measurability and verifiable nature of it. And I think data plays an important role in all of those, because you start to demonstrate all of those and really demonstrate superior performance. So this move here, and I think as Alexander's kind of saying, I think we've got an opportunity here to attract talent and improve the performance of companies that move quickly in this space. So I think we're really keen to use data to help show that companies that are moving quickly are also better performing, which is what we tend to see where we're supporting companies with a strong ESG agenda within their strategy, within their integrated business strategy.
Mike, how critical has data and digitalization and automation been in the way you have approached it in your strategy at Emerson?
I think the digitalization piece is absolutely critical. I think, one, we have these new ways of operating that Alexander just shared, where we can now work remotely, we can connect experts from around the world, we can leverage expertise for wherever it is. Tremendous opportunity there for that. So the opportunity for the collaboration, I think the data brings us better insights, so we'll know what directions to take these operations and things that we can do there. I also think it just across organizations, even in my own organization, you just see the way that you use the data, get it to the specific roles that need to see different kinds of data. It helps build the collaboration, brings a broader perspective, ultimately get to better solutions as part of that process. So I think that's been tremendous. Specifically with respect to Alexander, I am waiting for some green steel. We are a buyer of steel. We put it in our valves, we put it in our castings and some other things. It's part of my Scope 3 footprint that I need to manage. So I assume you have demand for your green steel. I know we're waiting in line because we're all going to have to move that direction. We're all going to be interested in making this happen. So I think the whole circularity of everything that we're working on is a tremendous, again, opportunity, and I hope it is a tremendous attraction for the talent that we've referenced here today.
I think the question then for Steph is, do governments now need to really clearly state what exactly is green? Almost like I think comparisons have been made over the last 10 days here in Glasgow to the nutritional labels that you see on food. Do we need a global standard on what is green steel? What is any of the greening, decarbonization models that will come out? Do we need government standards on that? Is it coming? And if not, why?
Yeah, I mean, I think that these kind of green standards are really important. We set out in our industrial decarbonisation strategy earlier this year that policies that aim to increase demand for low emissions products can be used to support UK manufacturers to decarbonise. And one of the real obstacles is that there's a lack of information about the climate impact of industrial products that are currently bought and sold in the market. So, there may be sort of large and small consumers who are willing to perhaps pay a bit more for products manufactured producing fewer emissions, but these products aren't clearly easily identifiable at the moment. So, if we had a simple way to recognise low carbon products and a better understanding of how, public and private sector can use purchasing power to support the transition, that would massively help. So, we do think that demand side policies such as low emission product standards, labelling, and indeed changes to both sort of public and private procurement practices can really enable buyers of industrial products to recognise low emissions products and use their purchasing power. So, it is something that we're looking at. We have said in the industrial decarbonisation strategy that we're working towards sort of voluntary standards around the middle of the decade, and then looking at moving on to mandatory standards later on. So it's definitely something that we are looking at. Specifically on hydrogen, we've just closed a consultation on what a low carbon hydrogen standard might look like, and we're sort of started to think about sort of what kind of certification might need to sit around that. So again, it's another area that's really important, and there's obviously an international element as well, because we operate in sort of internationally competitive markets on all of this. So there's that element to think about too.
So Stefan, whose doorstep is this going to end up falling on when we decide to make our set of regulations? Whose doorstep is it going to land up on? Because, as you say, this is an international market. Steel moves around. It goes from place to place, and that's just an example, one product. Whose doorstep is it going to land up on? And how long will it take do you estimate in your experience of dealing with all of this?
So I think to get to a standard that is sort of robust and works, I mean, we want to do this with the industry. It's not something we're looking to impose because it needs to be informed by industry. So it's going to take some time, and it needs to be done in concert with thinking and work that we're doing across government on sort of things like carbon border adjustment mechanisms and what that looks like to sort of make sure that in imposing standards for the UK, we don't simply disadvantage UK industries or make them internationally uncompetitive. So the two need to go hand in hand, and we've had this conversation internally in thinking about decarbonisation of sectors such as steel, but it's not just steel, it's across the piece.
It's across the piece indeed, and I think you bring up an important point where you say there's a lack of information about the impact of these products. There's a question in which is quite correlated from Felix, who is asking our panel, and please all of you take this one. Do you see a conflict between the increasing market value of data and the urgent need for democratization of data for climate change? How do you incentivize corporations to share data when the rise of modern tech companies have shown its value as a commodity? I think we've been talking about this through the day, and again, it brings up Steph's point. The government doesn't seem to know what the value is because the data obviously is not trickling back to them. Will everyone take that question?
Yeah, well, let me try to answer on that. I think data is quite a broad span weight if we talk about that. So we have sensitive data, we have general data. What is required when it comes to the calculation of the carbon footprint of a product is basically all the scope 3 carbon footprint. So we have to have all this data available, certified, that we can trust in these certificates for all the materials we require to produce a product. So, well, I would say that's a quite general data, not sensitive. They have to be made publicly available anyhow. Otherwise, we cannot succeed with these certificates. Other data is that are process relevant, that are IP relevant. This is sensitive data. As we are an international engineering plant builder, we see that with our end customers, so the steel producers, it's still quite tough to find an agreement how to share data. On the one hand, we really try to support the industry, and to support we need as much data as possible from a variety of customers. On the other hand, well, it's intellectual property of the producer. I see there is a bit of a different mindset in different parts of the world, I have to say. And maybe that's also a reason why Europe and some specific countries in Europe are lagging behind in the digitalization, because the willingness to share data is not there yet. If we look into China, I have to say they run really first when it comes to digitalization. So the first through process control models, really from ore beneficiation till the steel output, we have implemented in China quite successfully. Customers were ready to share all the data, and we implemented these models to the great benefit. It's really fully automized process. You can go up till a dark plant, meaning you have a central operating pulpit where all the data can come together. You analyze, you get the recommendations of what to optimize, the relevant alarms, all the issues. So I think the mindset of how we work with data is quite different in different parts of the world. Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think, in our own personal example, we've been engaging our supply chain about, at some point we are going to need these data because we want to show the improvements over what the models would suggest your footprint looks like. And I think everybody's been kind of spinning up their life cycle assessment processes, all of the ways you do to assess the carbon footprints. The organizations are starting to build some muscle in that. So I feel pretty optimistic again that I think companies, especially ones that have that ESG lens, that are being responsible, being responsive. We're all trying to get more comfortable with more disclosure. That's not a tendency. We have lawyers and other friends that, make that a challenge for us at times. But I think culturally, in our company, we're starting to get more comfortable with. We will be expressing our data more widely, make it more available. But again, we want to get more quality measurements in place as we go. So there's a little bit of reluctance if you don't have the high quality measurements. But I think over time, as people get their practices down, their processes down, I think we're going to feel more comfortable exchanging some of that data as we go forward.
Are you seeing that, Sam, that difference?
Yeah, I absolutely am. We're seeing that a lot. I think there's a couple of things that are probably driving it. So there's some big ambitions and pledges being set. So we saw yesterday the H20 pledge from WBCSD and Sustainable Markets Initiatives, some big companies making big targets and big pledges. I think that's forcing some more sharing to achieve those types of outcomes and pledges. I think the other thing that's really driving that data sharing is a sort of a recognition of a higher need for collaboration between companies and between sectors. We've got a lot of experience working within industrial clusters where there's multi-sector collaboration and even competitor collaboration, and all of that. We're just starting to be able to demonstrate the benefits to individual participants of collaboration and data sharing. So I think those things, I see that as an incredibly positive. I think it's broadening the types of data that are being shared quite quickly.
Steph, you've heard the movement is going to happen. You may just land up with the data you need, maybe a little bit slower than China, but give me an idea, because we've talked about hydrogen here, and it's one of those technologies that's getting pushed by the UK government. What are the next things that we're going to see from you? Because we've heard from Sam about the clusters. Tell us a little bit more about what we can expect in terms of policy support, all kinds of support that the UK government's going to give us in the next couple of months and years.
Sure. We part of this is wrapped up in our CCUS programme, and part of it obviously is separate because the UK government announced in the hydrogen strategy last summer a twin track approach to pursue both blue and green. So to start with the blue, so the net zero strategy, which we published last month, builds on the government's previous aspirations by setting an ambition to capture and store at least 6 megatons of CO2 from industrial sources per year by 2030 and 9 by 2035. And phase one of the CCUS cluster sequencing process provisionally included with the announcement of 2 clusters being sequenced onto track 1, HyNet and the East Coast cluster, both of which include hydrogen projects within them. So phase 2 launched on the 8th of November and opens the submission window for individual projects that could feasibly connect to these. And following the submission window, we're expecting negotiations with shortlisted projects to start from around May next year, and decisions relating to allocation of funding support to be made from Q2 in 2023. So in terms of sort of other things that we're doing, we're continuing to work to develop the CCUS and low carbon hydrogen business models to create an investable proposition effectively, with an aim to finalise those business models next year. We're working to deploy the industrial carbon capture and low carbon hydrogen projects through capital funding. So there's the £1 billion for the CCUS infrastructure fund and the £240 million net zero hydrogen fund, which will open for business we're aiming for sort of the spring of next year. And we've also set up the Industrial Decarbonisation and Hydrogen Revenue Support Scheme, which will fund the business models I mentioned earlier and give long-term certainty to investors and projects. So this was announced in the Net Zero strategy, and we'll be providing up to £140 million over this SR period to the next SR period to establish the scheme and to provide funding to some smaller green projects with commitments to announce further funding for the big blue and big green hydrogen projects at some point next year. So the hydrogen strategy published in August set out how the government is supporting the hydrogen economy to develop in various ways, including in terms of production, storage and demand. And we have a range of deliverables, including publishing more detail on our production strategy, as well as moving to look into work on networks, markets and storage. I could say more, but I'll stop there.
Oh, we'll come back to that, Steph, because I think the question for you gentlemen is these are all things that are going to take a little bit of time. So in the meantime, what do we do in terms of the innovations we already have? You talked about natural gas as an example. The gas prices, we know what's happening with them. We've had issues all across Europe, across the UK and Eastern Europe. Like 3 weeks ago, I was sitting with steel manufacturers who basically said, we might have to shut shop if the government can't give us emergency subsidies from the EU Environmental Fund, which did not make sense to the finance minister or the prime minister at that point in that particular country. How do you balance this in the short term while we wait for hydrogen to come online, wait for those projects to happen, the clusters to prove themselves? What do we do to balance the cost of these fossil fuels at this point? What other technologies are out there that can be used to balance and green these hard-to-abate sectors? If I can start with you, Alex, and then if I can go to you, Mike.
Sure. True. So it will take a while till we are at the hydrogen, the reasonable scale. And it's true, just looking to the recent months, what happened with the energy prices and the gas prices. So it's all about planning security for the industry, not only for the steel industry. If you base really an investment of a couple of billions to transform your business, you need that planning security. Well, what can you do on short term? There are plenty of measures. I would really say every steel mill has still a potential to reduce the carbon footprint 20–30% with their existing assets. So starting from energy efficiency projects, from waste heat recovery, but optimizing also the raw material basis. They're improving the yield of the process, going to continuous processes, casting and rolling without intermediate cooling and reheating in a furnace that is again fossil fired. And finally, also allowing for carbon capture, storage and utilization. So there's also a wonderful example at ArcelorMittal in Ghent for biotechnology. So really transforming carbon-rich waste gas into bioethanol that can be further treated and converted into e-fuels for the aviation. So we are one of the partners in there with LanzaTech as the technology provider, but also carbon capture in the steel industry is still at the beginning. So we see a couple of pilots around the world, but we have not seen really large-scale CCS projects so far. So we believe in the next couple of years, we will see the first projects also in steel there. Mm-hmm. And finally, let me make one point is this sector coupling that was just mentioned over here. I think that's an important issue. All this heavy hard-to-abate industry are quite linked to each other. Yeah? Just another example is steel produces about per ton of steel 500 kilogram of byproducts, so mainly slag. This slag goes mainly into the cement industry and supports really the cement industry for their decarbonization efforts. So they use it as cement clinker substitute. just assuming, yeah, if we don't support the cement industry with this type of byproducts, they would have a hard life. So I think collaboration, partnerships between the industries, and all these measures that bring us at least one step ahead on within short are quite important. Yeah.
Mike?
You know, I think short term, specifically on gas, the natural gas story. First of all, the markets are doing their job. They're signaling us we need a little more gas. I think that's the purpose of these markets. We can't turn gas on and off so quickly. You know, they come in chunks of investments, but hopefully that current pricing conversation is helping to motivate some more resources, obviously, in the shorter term to come to market. I think we'll see that. You know, the other thing, and Steph mentioned it, maybe she'll circle back on it. I love the clusters concept. I think it's a great way for us all to share, learn. It's a place where government can focus some resource, focus some attention. It's where our academic friends can focus some support as well. So I love the clustering conceptual out there, and I think to the extent, like with the incentives and the programs that were outlined here for the UK, I think that's a tremendous thing. We should be all fostering to make that happen right now. I would agree. The energy efficiency side, getting 20 or 30% out of our current facilities, it's there. You know, we see the different producers. You know, there's top quartile performance, and then there's everybody else. If we get everybody moved towards top quartile, that will save emissions. Obviously, we'll save efficiency. Maybe we'll save the energy that's required. Maybe we'll save some input resources. You know, staying focused on being top quartile performers, I think, is still an absolute critical thing to do.
Sam?
Yeah, I mean, in the work we're doing, and we're doing some work with the South Wales cluster here in the UK, we're just publishing a report, and it's looking at exactly these kind of opportunities for immediate efficiencies and benefits. They're going to lead to resilience during the transition phase, but they're really going to optimize overall business performance. It's not just an ESG or a carbon play. This is about optimizing business performance and making regions and companies more competitive, protecting jobs and industry, which is important in the transitional phase. So I think far from being worried, I think we can see, there are things to be done, but we can really see the opportunities that this process is bringing, and I think it should bring a greater resilience to many companies.
Steph, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's headed back here to Glasgow to reiterate his commitment and the UK's commitment, and obviously your work and your team's work features very strongly in that commitment. What do you want to see from these sectors? You've talked about requiring information and data, but what can private sector give the government at this point to make their jobs in setting the regulations, setting the policies in stone, so they're not left in doubt? What do you need? What can they give you?
So, I mean, data is obviously really important, as we've talked about. I mean, I think one of the things that has characterised a lot of the programmes that we're working on, it has been a really good public-private sector partnership around some of this. So, our work on hydrogen, we've focused a lot through the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund as we're setting that up on production. We're also trying to think about end uses and the bits in the middle. So, really sort of understanding the pipeline, understanding what's coming, and sort of understanding where government can sort of lean into greatest effect needs that kind of partnership. I think, it's not just about, sorry, it dropped a minute there. Can you still hear me?
Can still hear you. You have about 20 seconds to wrap that thought up.
Okay. It's not just about spending money, though, right? I mean, we've talked about energy efficiency and resource efficiency and sort of clustering, and I think that sometimes industry is best placed to take the lead on that. I mean, we work with the big industrial clusters, but there are smaller clusters out there. We've talked to, for example, the Black Country, where the clusters methodology can be really useful for sort of like a group of smaller, sort of more dispersed sites, as well. So kind of, you know, we want to sort of have a proper partnership across all of these issues, whether it's the big tech and the big spend, or whether it's things like, you know, resource efficiency, circular economy, how we can sort of just, you know, create a better you know, cycle for decarbonisation, and we're seeing that happen. But you know, more and more that needs to be the case.
And collaboration has been literally the theme of the Sustainable Innovation Forum. So thank you for that note, Steph. Thank you very much to Steph, Sam, Mike, and Alexander for joining us and giving us your thoughts on what needs to happen. It's going to be a tough journey ahead, but I wish you all the best. A round of applause, please.